Welcome to Pakefield, a quiet district in Lowestoft, England's most easterly town and birthplace of the composer Benjamin Britten. Aside from fresh fish and chips and a beautiful beach, Lowestoft is also home to the First Light Festival and a hidden gem, an old Victorian school that's also been a coachworks, youth club, art school, theatre centre, which went on to become a full theatre that closed and reopened and evolved, soaring ever higher. Welcome to the school that grew wings.
It was constructed around about 1895. I've seen pictures of sort of wooden scaffolding pools and lots of workmen. And it was open to the pupils in 1896 because Lowestoft was a growing, developing town with the population surging at the time.
My mother used to bring me to the school here, walked me here until I was old enough to cycle on my own and cross the A12, and we would go into the assembly hall, which was quite big, and I think it had a stage at one end.
There's a classroom above here. On the left there, where your reception is, there was something called a marching corridor, where the infants were allowed to sort of march backwards and forwards indoors if the weather was bad. It was originally intended for girls and infants only, and then they suddenly realised there was a whole load of boys out there that needed educating, and then they're coming through, the families were growing, and so they weren't particularly prepared for boys, so the toilets were designed for girls only, and they suddenly had to split the playground in half and give the boys a certain area, and they brought some wood in. This is after a lovely brick construction for the building. And the boys had a discreet urinal in the far corner of their playground.
And our headmaster, Mr. East, he used to welcome us, tell us what was going to happen on that particular day, and we would say prayers, and then we would be counted, and we would then shuttle off to our various classes.
The basic subjects, what we call the 3 R's, they were the basics: reading, writing and arithmetic, and a bit of science and geography and that sort of thing. I think it was called PT, which is physical training. You do this, it's a drill: marching, running, jumping, they have to follow the leader sort of thing. The actual classes were framed in standards, and there was a curriculum they had to follow, and they were expected to reach that standard. If they didn't, they'd possibly stay behind another year to reach it.
I was bottom of the class for the school for arithmetic. They didn't call it maths then, it was arithmetic. And one of the reasons why I failed in arithmetic is because one of the classes they sat me at the back of the room and I couldn't see the board. So I really needed some glasses, but my mother obviously couldn't afford that.
Kirkley, it was a developing area, so there were large classes, 50, 60, something like that, and they took pupils as soon as they could, and in fact it became overcrowded.
When I was a little girl, all my brothers came to this school. I had 6 big brothers and 2 sisters, and they all came to school, so we had 9 children in this school, and I came here when I was 5 years old.
They used sand trays, they could write in the sand. They would use chalk on slate for writing as well. They would use then pencil, and until they were really proficient in pencil, they weren't allowed to use ink because it was such a blotchy experience if you were no good at it.
Eventually, the school bought me these glasses, which I wore, and I was in the playground, and one of the boys who was older than me came up and started to call me Four Eyes. I didn't like that. I smacked him one, and his nose bled, and the teacher took me off to the headmaster.
It was a gentleman called Mr. East for years before that, and his nickname was Daddy East, but I don't think you called him Daddy East to his face, and Mr. East. See?
Mr. East, my brothers used to come home here, he was so strict, they used to really be a bit scared of him. He was the real headmaster.
And Mr. East said that we don't have fighting, not in the playground, so you've got to get caned. So he said, do you want it left hand, right hand, or on your backside? So I said, left hand. So he put your hand out and he gave me one, and that really, really did hurt. I mean, today that would be grievous bodily harm.
There are records around of girls as well as boys having to be given the cane. There's one, 6 on the hand and 3 on the seat.
So the second one came down and I grabbed the stick, and as he came up it snapped in halves. And he laughed and he said, that's the first one. And I thought, right, no more caning. But he opened the drawer, there must have been 20 other canes in there of all different sizes. And he got one and he said, here's a whack for breaking it and 2 more for causing trouble. I didn't fight anymore, that cured me. And the only other run-in I had with Mr. East was that I think it was something to do with my sight and arithmetic. And the teacher took me to his office, which was on the next floor and it overlooked the entrance to the school. The teacher said, sit there, which I did, and she left. And I was there for about 3/4 of an hour and suddenly realised that there weren't many people about. I looked out the window and 1 or 2 of the children were playing about, went to the door and it was locked. So I thought, I've got a problem here. So I undone one of the windows and got out onto the flat roof, which was then above the entrance of the school. And I shimmered myself down onto this flat top, and then I came over the top and down a drain pipe to the floor. I got to the floor and I thought, right, I'll go home. So I went home. I didn't say anything to my mum because I thought I might get smacked. So about 6 o'clock, a knock came on the door, and there stood Mr. East with the teacher. And she said, is Rod in? And Mum said, yes. He said, oh, thank God for that. We've been looking everywhere for him. She explained the situation, and I got let off. I think that's how I got my free glasses.
People used to play on the streets in those days. There's no motor car traffic as such, just a very occasional, special car that might go past. It's mainly horse and cart, and you could get out of the way pretty quickly there, and you played all sorts of games.
And there was a playground at the back. We used to bring our cycles and we used to cycle round and round and round it. And there was all barbed wire down the bottom, and we've gone round and round on these cycles, and I lost control once and I went right into this barbed wire, and I've still got marks on my legs.
Things were so cheap. I mean, we used to go to the Odeon cinema. It used to cost a penny to go in, and you become a member. And it always stopped when we watched High Old Silver or Tonto, fish and chips from Mr. Bird's fish and chip shop. Used to be 1 and 1. That's a penny of fish, penny of chips, and if you're lucky, you got a bag of scraps. And then when I got 12, war was declared, and Lowestoft became a port of war, front line, and we were all evacuated and dispersed throughout the country.
Lowestoft was a frontline town. It became a base for 5 different naval bases, and one of them was where people could be recruited into the Royal Navy. There was only 4 in the country at the time. Lowestoft was one of them. It had a harbour and a haven where shipbuilding was going on, and of course all the shipbuilding might was turned to the war effort. The other side of the coin is that we were 20 minutes flying time from Nazi-occupied Europe. The Luftwaffe, they used a lot of their practice time to come over and strafe the town and release bombs. But there was an actual target, Hafen und Lagen, the haven and the lake. That's what they were aiming for, because in the harbour were all the minesweepers and the destroyers, Royal Navy vessels, and in the haven were the shipbuilding areas. But, of course, if you're flying a plane at 300 miles an hour and you're arriving in cloud or a snowstorm and there's no automatic stuff, you've got to do it manually, and you've got to go by what you see, then it's not so easy to hit an actual target. So therefore the town took a big hammering, and because of that all the planning was to make sure we would protect ourselves from bombing raids, getting people away from theatres of war where they would be caught up in any actual battlefields. And one of those things, of course, was evacuation of children. Just about all the schools had to leave Lowestoft for a certain period. There was state evacuation of the schools, where the parents had to sign to say that they would release their children in the care of their teachers who volunteered to actually take part in the scheme. Not all of them did, because some of them are called up. So the ones who actually wanted to transfer with their children, they were not just their teachers, they were their welfare agents while they were, in the Midlands.
And when I was just over 6, we had to be evacuated from the school. And me and my sister, who was 2.5 years older than me, we had to do the usual, get our things in the suitcase, and my mother brought us up to the school, and the school out there, and the yard was full of children, and we all had to get in our class groups, and my poor mother had to see us off on this coach where we all went down to the station and got evacuated. And that must have been terrible for her.
The headmaster was in charge of the whole lot, and very often he liaised with the headmaster of the schools where they were going to, because remember, they still wanted to teach the children. So they were assuming there were schools for them to do that, and on the whole there were, but it meant a shared experience.
And there was a little sweet shop round the corner, and they had a special smell about it, which was a lovely smell, and that smell of that sweet shop was with me the whole time I was evacuated, which was about 5 years. And all I wanted to do was get back home just to be able to go in that sweet shop and relive it all again.
The one we know of course, is Claude Castleton, VC, who served in the Imperial Australian Infantry. But he had started school here in about 1904 or something like that. And he got a scholarship to the secondary school, which was the grammar school, if you like. He went all through that, and he got his qualifications, and he decided to become a teacher. He was received back here at Morton Road School as a student teacher to assist his previous headmaster and all the other teachers who were still here. And he did that for a year, and he got his qualification to do that. He then transferred and did another year in a school in North Lowestoft, then decided that's it for teaching, and he went to Australia, and there's a wonderful piece that's written in the logbook, and it says something like this: always fond of the open air, Claude Castleton was a keen nature student. No wonder that he sought later on the free life of Australasia, in the orchards of Tasmania, the uplands of New South Wales, the sugar plantations of Queensland, and the wilds of New Guinea. When he returned to Sydney last year, he wrote thus to his old headmaster, Mr. John Munnings: "You will see that I am now a machine gunner in the Australian forces. I was for some time in New Guinea prospecting for gold, but when war broke out, I joined the forces formed there for the defence of the wireless station. I was in command of an outpost of native police until the German warships in those waters having been accounted for, I came down to Sydney to join the forces there." And then, of course, he was transferred to Egypt, do his training. He fought in Gallipoli, ill for several periods, transferred to France because of his experiences. These were his comrades, some of whom he fought with in Gallipoli. He decided to go out at night when there was all the hell going on, the bullets and flares and gas and goodness knows what. He rescued 2 people on his back, shoulder, fireman's lift, brought them back, and he went to get a 3rd one, and he himself was shot. But he was commended, and he is one of Lowestoft's 2 VC heroes, Morton Road schoolboy.
My brother, he was a pupil at this school, and he finished up being deputy mayor of Lowestoft. He was a builder and did a lot of work and built voluntary shelters which were on the seafront outside the Jolly Sailors. And this school started them off, and that was an excellent school. My father was quite strict, and he was really pleased that they were here. And of course that was on our doorstep, so that went really well.
And I used to love the school. It was brilliant. It was happy.
But I've got no bad experiences of this place at all. It was really lovely part of my life, being here. Yeah. Morton Root School. What school did you go to when I was a child? And I said Morton Root School, and I'm proud of it.
Join us next time to hear about the East Anglian Coachworks, the Youth Club, Art School, Cinema and the Lowestoft Theatre Centre. How do you put on a play with soaring and construction work going on underneath?